Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It's amazing to have you along with us for the ride today. I have an incredible guest lined up for you today, and I would love to welcome Justin Johnson from Motivate to the podcast. Welcome, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. It's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
It's awesome to have you along with me today, and we're going to talk about some stuff that's near and dear to my heart, that's for sure, which is B2B e-commerce and how to make that better for sellers in the space. But before we get into Motivate and what it is and does and how it does it, why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you came to be in this incredible B2B e-commerce space in the first place?
Yeah, it's quite the story. I've been in tech for B2B for about 25 years, started my career as a developer, really been focused on the industrial side of B2B for building sales tools, sales insights tools, operational improvement, all sorts of things. I'm actually on my fourth company as a founder now, built and sold 3 companies already, some to the largest private equity companies in the world. Thought about AI and what it can accomplish for e-commerce specifically. And we started, the team and I that have started these many other companies, started a company called Go. Motivate is the sort of trade name. And yeah, just leveraging the latest and greatest AI to help folks do better at e-commerce is really what we're doing here.
Love it. And I love the focus on B2B. It's certainly been what I've been focusing on as an independent consultant for the last 4+ years. And man, it is an exciting space. And finally, I think B2B e-commerce in particular, digital commerce, because e-commerce is often a term that's not even used in the B2B world. People use the term buyer's portal or seller's portal or trade portal, or they use online catalog or online, buying channels. And oftentimes the term e-commerce is just not common in the B2B world, just like the term click and collect is not common in the B2B world, but will call is. And just we use an entirely different language or dictionary in the B2B world than what's used in the traditional B2C and D2C world. And it's further complicated by a few things, and I'd love your take on this. It's complicated by the fact that in the B2B world, there's 3 primary digital sales channels, that being punch out, that being EDI, and that being self-service e-commerce or portalized shopping experiences. But then we have this whole thing where we have digital hybrid sales channels that are completely common in the B2B world that just do not exist in the B2C world. Sending messages via WhatsApp, sending messages via Slack, sending orders via email, sending an attached spreadsheet of an order with a PO number at the top of it, sending a PO via PDF. We've got these concepts and these data primitives in the B2B world and these channel concepts and this whole human mediated exchange of data that just does not exist in the traditional B2C world. And that makes the B2B commerce world significantly more complex by definition, doesn't it?
It sure does. And it's an interesting transformation that B2B companies have had. We compare a lot of our B2C experiences with what we see at Amazon, right? Biggest, baddest, arguably invented the whole process. One-click buys. But I ask our industry and our customers in just the B2B world all the time this question: do we buy B2B like we buy on Amazon? And you think about, when's the last time, I've looked at my order history and my wives and friends and other things. It's like, when's the last time that you bought more than 3 items on Amazon or any other B2C website, right? You go there for an item, maybe during the holiday season, you're picking up a few other things, but you're very pointed at what you want. And you'll take the time to search a catalog, to navigate a catalog, to do your thing, and you're satisfied because that list isn't that long. But then when we get to the B2B side, use electrical, for example, or plumbing or HVAC or some of these markets, it's very rare that you're picking less than 3 items. Most of the time, it's a purchase order or a list that's 10 to 50 items. And B2B companies ask themselves, I wish they would have 10 years ago when they implemented all these massive e-commerce systems, but they ask themselves, well, is this the experience that a buyer wants? How would you take a list of 10 items with very specific SKUs and details, sizes, and navigate your right now your B2B e-commerce process. It is a very difficult situation. And that explains to us why there's 1, 2, 3% of total revenue going through e-commerce, because it's just not meeting the customer where they're at. So they end up sending that information off to the CSR or the inside sales team to process it, although we know they want to be self-serving. There's a huge generation, as we know, that wants to not talk to anybody. They just want to procure and move on. Very interesting.
It's interesting that you allude to the buying demographic changes, because Forrester recently came out with their latest study, and over 71% of B2B buyers today in the United States are either millennial or Gen Z. And the reality is that those new generation of buyers, because the reality is historically, the B2B world in general has been dominated by the male, the pale, and the stale, right? The reality is that historically B2B has been a good old boys club. It's been you're over 50s, in some cases you're over 60s and 70s. You've got second and third generation family-owned B2B businesses where now the grandchildren of the founder are literally taking over running these businesses. And so what we've had historically is also extreme monopolies in the B2B world, where they've had exclusive distributorships, exclusive manufacturing of specific products and brands in certain markets. And all of those traditional barriers have come down to where now very rarely will a manufacturer appoint an exclusive distributor, or they'll maybe have an exclusive distributor in a tiny little region for a very short period of time. But this whole good old boys club mentality of the B2B world is rapidly going away. And as a result of that, and because of the buying demographic aging out of the industry, the new demographic of B2B buyers are young, overwhelmingly young, over nearly 2/3 are young, and they're digital natives. And the requirements of those buyers are evolving extremely rapidly. And nowhere was that made more clear than during COVID, when sales reps couldn't go and see customers anymore. And that lit a fire under a lot of these B2B brands to realize that they needed digital routes to market, right?
That's right. Exactly. And everyone scrambled to get it done. And they cleaned up their catalog, which was helpful. Most of these B2B suppliers, their websites are beautiful. They've implemented really rock solid, secure e-commerce solutions that bring in buyer preferences, allow them to repeat buy. Some of them allow that, is it quick pad, right? Where they can enter the number of items and the SKU number as if they've bought it consistently. And that's typically involves a purchasing professional that has that information, but they've put a lot of effort into it. But the question is, what's next? And I talk to the e-commerce directors, e-commerce managers constantly, and everyone got really excited about this. They've got 5 or 6 people internally, oftentimes. Some of them have built their own, and they see the 1 to 2% returns. And then it's, okay, what do we do now? Interesting question.
And it's interesting you point that out, because a lot of the brands that work with me as a consultant, one of the things they ask me to do is to come in and help them make the business case for digital investments, because they don't know how to do it. And they don't really even know how to ask their customers the right questions. They don't know how to contextualize the questions to say, hey, look, we're thinking about implementing e-commerce, or we're thinking about adding this feature or function. Does that matter to you? What does matter to you? How could we make this more relevant to you? And I always recommend that B2B sellers, that they actually create an adoption plan and do the adoption research before they ever start scoping a solution at all.
Brilliant.
Because at the end of the day, like you say, you're never going to get ROI. You're never going to get time to value on your investment unless you're actually building for what your customer actually wants. And it's crazy with them. I email through my orders to them. I send it through to them through WhatsApp, whatever, and they just get it done for me. They enter it into the ERP and it just gets sent out for me. But then when you dig a little bit deeper and you start asking about all the follow-up questions to that, which is, okay, fine, let's just set e-commerce to the side for the moment. But what if you could log into a portal? What if you could check the status of inventory? What if you could research this specific details around a product? What if you could download a spec sheet? What if you could download an MSDS? What if you could see an exploded drawing? What if you could make a quote request? What if you could lodge a return request digitally and follow that all the way till it's back and credited to your account? What if you could check your historic orders and download invoices and check the status of your credit account and all these things? What if you could do all those things in a service way, but continue to transact with your sales rep in the way that you always have? And all of a sudden their eyes light up and they go, that would be really helpful. If I could log in and track my order from the time it leaves your warehouse to the time it arrives in my warehouse, that would be really good, because my inbound receiving team needs to know when this container of goods or whatever it is arriving, and therefore I need to plan in my day when this is going to hit and when I need to onboard this product into my warehouse. It's in a lot of instances, it's about how we contextualize the questions to be meaningful to the buyer and the experiences and the pain points that they're going through. Because I tell you, if you ask them and you say, tell me the top thing that you love about doing business with this seller, and then tell me the top one or two things that you hate, that make you hate doing business with the seller, the things that are painful. They will tell you these three things. If they can improve these three things, it would make our lives so much easier. And oftentimes it isn't necessarily about the transaction, it's about everything other than the transaction. And so it's a deeper discussion you have to be able to have.
Absolutely. And that's key. It's listening to the customer and finding out where they're at. In each industry are a little different, right? Plumbing, HVAC, building supply, it's all their use cases and patterns are just different. And they really have to focus on the buyer's use case, because there's the field that's making orders. There's a purchasing agent. Just depending on the size of the organization, things float. Oftentimes, everything has to go through the purchasing department. Then they issue a PO or they make that order themselves. Some are in the HVAC space. They're driving around in their van and they need to make that order now, and it needs to show up before they arrive to the building. You've got to be able to call out each one of those use cases and figure out a way to work with them, especially when it comes to e-commerce, because there's so much time, energy, and money being spent there. Just to have a cart doesn't mean it's successful, right? You've got to look at how they're buying. A good example is our e-commerce module allows buyers to be able to upload an unstructured file, and it matches and comes up with a catalog and then confirms it. But when we started to talk to these buyers, they said, this is great, but what if you can do email, text, or voice to cart? Because I don't want to navigate a website on my phone, and I'm in the field a lot. I want to be able to WhatsApp, text, email, or voice. If I can't look down, I'm a safe driver, I'm in my van, I need to be able to go, I'm on my way branch to pick up what I need. I need to know it's there. I don't need to wait on hold or wait for my rep to be available because they're busy. I just want to speak into the phone and make sure that got to get a confirmation that it's going to be at the dock when I arrive. So it's all about listening to the customers, and suppliers just have to do that in this case.
And to your point, I was doing a deep dive discovery with one of the largest product makers in the United States in their particular vertical. They're an industrial product supplier, and they supply a specific product into industry.
Great.
And when I was speaking with the sales team, they gave me two concrete examples of exactly what you just described. They said, he said, look, I'm going to show you right now on my phone. He held it up to the screen. He said, this is a message my customer sent to me via WhatsApp that was a handwritten order on a Post-it note on his desk. He took a photo of the Post-it note on his phone. Then he messaged the image of the Post-it note to me on WhatsApp and said, can you place this order for me? He then said, okay, I'm going to show you another example of how my customer placed an order. He said, my customer is so old school that he doesn't fully understand how to attach a spreadsheet file to an email. So what he does is he creates the spreadsheet order on his computer, his Excel file. He then takes a screenshot of his screen, of the spreadsheet on his screen. He attaches the screenshot of the screen in the spreadsheet to an email, emails the screenshot to me. I manually then type in his order from the screenshot into our ERP system to fulfill his order.
Yep.
And there are many, many other stories similar to this, that the crazy ways in which people get orders into their sales reps' hands, it's almost too many to count, because it's wild. It's wild, the things that you see in the B2B world, but they're so commonplace that if you can't cater for those, you will lose out on sales. There's no question about that.
Yep. It's automating that inside sales position's job as well. As you mentioned, people will continually send it via WhatsApp, text, or email into that customer service rep. And you've got to automate that process, because having somebody in the system going to the ERP and manually typing that spreadsheet that you said that was an image, or whether that guy would drag and drop it into the e-commerce environment, you have to meet the customer where they're at. There's been amazing work that's been done on EDI or punch outs or templates that customers follow. But to be sure, you can do that with your biggest customers. But most
Yeah.
suppliers work with thousands of customers that aren't going to work right like that. So you've
Yes.
absolutely got to find a system that automates your internal people so they can be more efficient at manual entry and spend more time on the phone or advising customers on product knowledge. And then the same thing with customers. It's just that's the future. It has to happen to be competitive these days for all these B2B suppliers.
Yeah, and to your point, I think it's great if you can create a self-service e-commerce portal that's super easy to use and has bulk upload where you can actually upload a CSV. You can supply a template that's
Mm-hmm.
downloadable by the customer. They can populate it. They can re-upload it with their PO number and the whole thing, or they've got a bulk multi-line entry model and multi-line search and entry model with a bulk add to cart, auto reorder, all auto replenish, all those sorts of things. Those are great tools and they're amazing. And I
Uh-huh.
think that there absolutely still has to be a focus on how can we get customers to adopt that as the maybe the primary self-service method. And then of course EDI and punch out are never going to go away because e-procurement's not going away anytime soon. But even in an e-procurement model, they still want those self-service other functions that you
Uh-huh.
can't do through an EDI or a punch out model. And I
Right.
think also that's what you're referring to. And I think also the as a stepping stone to getting your buyers comfortable with a self-service e-commerce experience, if you can allow them to continue to place orders in the way in which they are comfortable, but effectively convert those orders using a tool like yours
Mm-hmm.
into and mapping it into the commerce system to where
Yeah.
effectively to the commerce system it ends up looking like an order that was manually entered through the front end e-commerce front end, but you're mapping it in such a way that that the business logic matches what the e-commerce system is expecting, and then it can go through the standard integration workflow into ERP, into WMS, OMS, whatever it is.
Exactly.
That feels like a really it's an incredibly important bridging function until everybody in the buying world is a digital native and it's
Mm-hmm.
as natural as breathing to go into an e-commerce website and place an order.
Yeah. And I guess let me make sure I'm clear about trying to automate the e-commerce process for the customer. It's not about downloading a template. It's not about fitting into the box that the website has provided. We know that doesn't work. It was version 1 and it's great. It works for the purchasing professionals that have that template sitting there for the largest customers. But what we're really talking about is taking, I had a customer last week that wrote on the back of a roof shingle, took a picture of it and uploaded it to their cart and bought right there. So it's about that completely unstructured, take a picture of you got to meet customers where they're at. Otherwise they're going to go somewhere else. But if somebody knows they can take whatever file they want, they don't care, and buy from you, that company wins every time. And they will continue to
Yeah,
do it as they go.
Yeah, and look, I think there are some e-commerce platforms out there in the B2B world that are
Mm-hmm.
starting to get religion around
Yeah.
this. You've got Oro and their AI-powered sales agent. You've got some other platforms out there. Better Commerce is starting to work on their effectively channel-agnostic commerce engine, which allows people to send in emails and WhatsApps and everything else. But there still are a tremendous amount of e-commerce platforms out there, particularly the ones that have tried to bolt on B2B functionality where they started out as a B2C,
Exactly.
D2C focused platform. They've tried to add on the B2B functionality, but it's hard, it's complex, the sales processes are complex, the catalogs are complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what your platform seems to do, in all transparency, I've never used your platform before, but it helps level up the capabilities of those platforms such that now all of a sudden we can interpret, we can ingest, and we can interpret these orders regardless of the format, regardless of the file type, regardless of how they're written, regardless of kind of almost the substrate they're written on. We can now, using AI, we can interpret these, turn them into something meaningful, and then map them into the commerce platform in such a way that we can actually process them in some sort of automated way instead of having to have a human parse every single one of those orders that comes through our system.
Yeah, you're spot on. And it's about this, it's hard. And it's also part of the reason that we filed multiple patent applications around this process because sure, anyone can use AI or traditional OCR to read unstructured information, right? That's not following a template. That's been around for, I think I wrote my first OCR in 2007, right? The difficulty is the speed and the accuracy that this is done. So you can do this in an enterprise environment with a CSR sitting there understanding it. But when you have a customer on a beautiful e-commerce website that's wicked fast, upload a file that has 58 line items on it with unit of measurement and special pricing and all these different things, and you take longer than 10 seconds to process, that's a problem. It really is. And so they'll abandon it and they'll say, maybe if I'm looking at 3 to 5 items, but at that point they can just manually type it in anyway. So it's looking at large unstructured files with details, some with SKU number, some with part number, item ID, some with just short description, but it's looking at all of it and then doing an accurate match so that they're not like, oh, great, you matched on half of it, but half of it you didn't. So that's going to take me longer than just sending it into the CSR anyway. So it's a combination of all of that. And it's also the importance of being headless. There's a lot of e-commerce, wonderful B2B e-commerce systems out there. And to be able to get strong market share that we're chasing, it's got to be headless. It's got to be able to work with all of them. So we sit on top of all these systems to be able to process that unstructured data and then map right into the existing cart with all the special permissions that customer has and their discounts and all those different tools
Catalog
that are available.
restrictions and all that stuff.
Exactly. You don't mess with that because those folks have it dialed in. We just try to, again, text, email, voice, and upload to cart to automate that process for them.
Right. And so this is more about automating the populate cart process than anything else, right? So this is actually when they're in the e-commerce experience, or can this be completely independent of the actual website experience where maybe I'm sending it in via a WhatsApp and then that order is just going to get processed against my account in that commerce system? Or is it both? Is it meant to work both within the commerce experience itself to help populate the cart based on an uploaded file of some variety, combined with being able to actually receipt orders through independent channels, independent of the commerce experience, but then ultimately integrating that into the commerce engine?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have this sort of diamond of value that we promote to the market. The first part is working with the internal sales team to automate their order and quote process. So we integrate directly with Eclipse, P21, SAP, Infor, all those ERP systems, where if an order comes in via text or email, we process it, send it right into the ERP, and they just approve it. The second part is we typically see about a 40 to 45% time saving on that task. So then we have what we call our sales insights. So it's turning those inside salespeople into outbound wizards. So now we're teeing up a task list of between 10 and 15 items a day to tell them the next best action, the cross-sell, the upsell, the slippage alerts. We make them smart about what their next action with these customers are and incentivize them that way. And then ultimately what we also do is empower the customer. So that's independent of e-commerce. Then we have our e-commerce module that uplifts their e-commerce revenue double, triple in many cases, because it empowers the customer to buy the way they want through that same unstructured file, Excel file, PDF, image, handwritten note, and they can just go direct to e-commerce, either upload their file, text their file into e-commerce, email it into e-commerce, or voice. They, oftentimes say e-commerce at ABC.co, and somebody emails it, says, here's my file. We return a confirmation page that says this is it, and then they're done. Because a lot of people don't want to visit the website to do it, right? They want to be able to be flexible. WhatsApp is another great example. That's how they communicate, right? You can WhatsApp to your customer service rep, or you can go right to commerce and complete that order.
Okay, and so that channel would then effectively populate your cart. If you wanted to go to e-commerce, it would populate your cart via voice message, say, for example.
Yep.
And then I'm guessing that then sends back a link to you that then you click on the link and then boom, I'll open it in my e-commerce experience and the cart's ready to rock for me.
That's it. Exactly. We often require it behind a login so that all that information is there and there's not a bunch of
you still have to authenticate to make sure it's the right person and all that sort of stuff, which makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And it really has met customers where they're at. It's amazing, those traditional buyers that you wouldn't see coming to e-commerce, and they're like, whoa, all I had to do was send a text with that same message to the e-commerce environment, and I got a return with a confirmation of the cart, and I locked it in. That's it.
All I got to do is click the link, open up the e-commerce experience, and effectively authorize the order.
It loads your cart. Exactly.
Wow. Cool. And do you have, what quote unquote out of the box integrations do you have today with e-commerce engines, the Oros of the world, the
Yep.
BigCommerces of the world. What out-of-the-box integrations do you have, and what does a custom integration look like in a scenario where you maybe don't have an out-of-the-box integration with a commerce engine?
Yeah, we've got APIs to several of them, but what we found is we don't need to go there. We ultimately integrate with the endpoint, the API endpoint, or just the URL of the cart. We sit in front of it. We need access to the catalog, right? E-commerce catalog, and then we ultimately just punch it out right into the e-commerce world. They've already authenticated their user because we don't launch until we're behind the login anyway. So it truly is headless. Half our customers have homegrown developed systems anyway, which is always a treat. But yeah, it's any of those systems we have integrations with now. And it's not, I wouldn't even call it an integration because we're headless. We just sit right in front of it. It's all server side.
Wow. And it almost feels like, in some respects, you're a little bit like a search merchant personalization engine in the sense that you have to get a feed, you have to get a product feed, you have to index all the products, you have to index the SKUs, you have to index the attributes, you have to index basically everything about the product that the seller has available about their product. And that information then maps or translates into the types of information or language that a customer might use to buy that product, whether it's a piece of the product name, whether it's the SKU, whether it's a piece of the description, whatever. And you're trying to do this matching between any piece of information or collectively the information that the customer gives you and the catalog information you have to hand. It says, okay, we need to try to find a reasonable match here. And hey, is this the product we think it is? And then I suppose, because you're AI driven, if you can't find a match, then you may ask for a little bit more information from the customer in real time.
Yeah, we ultimately have three scenarios. We have an exact match, a partial match, and a no match. The partial match suggests between 3 and 5 products that are close, right? Maybe they didn't include the color or the size, and that was a general description there. So we guide them through as best we can. And then there's a no match, and that's ultimately, we don't have an automatic match here, right? But there's still a type ahead sort of search function that searches the catalog to be able to come up with something. You hit it where, was this possible 5 years ago? I was snooping around it and dabbling. CR certainly is. Large language models that we have access to multiple of them, that's the game changer. But it's also, we've been in this industry for 25 years, right? When I say industry, we say B2B. On the HVAC, the electrical, right? The building supply, the industrial worlds. And we have a lot of experience in this information, catalog structures and lack thereof, because as we know, folks that work with some of the pros right now, Jason Hine, for example, guys like that really get them dialed in, I'm sure you do as well, are in good spots. But we see short descriptions and UPCs. Oh, that's it. That's what we have. Our customers know what they want.
Wow.
Okay. You sure? Have you asked them lately? Because there's a lot of opportunity here. So yeah, we work with what our customers have, and we tested it for a while now and realized that, yeah, those customers are used to working with very limited sets of data. That's how they order from you. That's how they communicate. Could your business be better and growing and more significant if you had a better catalog? Absolutely. They know it. It just seems really hard to them. So
yeah, especially if their catalog is 1 million plus SKUs, which is not uncommon. Having a catalog of 10 million in industrial is not uncommon.
Yep, it's not at all. We see that all the time. So yeah, better the catalog, the better the results, and they know that. But we can handle what we get essentially, and that's not our work. We don't go fix that catalog. We point to people like you to help them with that.
And Jason, I can help clients model out what kind of data mappings and what kind of data they need and what gaps they need to fill.
Yeah.
Jason will actually help them do that action, and it's basically sit alongside them as they do that action to help clean up and make their catalog more consistent. And look, Jason's a close friend, and he's very good at what he does.
Great.
But in a case where my clients can't do that work themselves, I happily point them in Jason's direction, because he's the kind of guy that can actually sit alongside them and actually get them to a good place with their product data.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a super exciting space, and I think you've only just started this new platform. You just started building it this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on the tech for about a year now. And really, but we've gone to market in the last, certainly this year. Yep.
Wow. And are you finding, first of all, how are you finding your clients? Obviously, this is a huge problem. Every B2B conference, I was just a B2B online Florida. I was just speaking there. Look, this seems to be a almost universal challenge for the B2B industry, is the fact that, hey, there is no consistent way how we receive orders from our customers. Some of us receive it by a freaking carrier pigeon, some of it's by a fax, some of it's crazy, the stories that you hear from the trenches in the B2B world about how people receive their orders from customers. It's wild. Like some of
It
it's
is.
Slack, and it's across every messaging channel you can imagine. Okay, great. I got a DM on LinkedIn and they want me to place this order for me. It's crazy what you hear, right? So it is a pretty universal challenge in
Oh,
the
it's
B2B
huge.
world that
Yeah.
you're taking on.
Mhm.
So it's the problem statement is very crystal clear. How are you getting the word out apart from through podcasts like mine?
Yeah.
How are you finding these cohorts of customers that you can then have these conversations with so that they even know you exist, that a solution like yours is even in market?
Yeah. It helps that I've been in this industry for 25 years and I've built 3 companies already that have been wildly successful for them.
Yes.
Customers say, "What's Justin doing next?" Okay, this is great. This isn't a build and sell experience for me this time. This is a long-term play now. And so I know where to go to get 50 customers, right? And then the 150 and then the 200 and then that group. There's key groups, the buying groups and the associations. We're fairly new to the e-commerce space. Most of what I've built is on the enterprise side, the SaaS enterprise side. So meeting folks like you and Justin King and Jason and all these folks, I love the energy is unmatched. You guys are fantastic. And we're going to do some stuff with B2B e-commerce. Yeah, exactly. And we're looking for partners all over the place because there's a lot of consultants that have clients and they say, wow, again, we stood up this incredible system. But now what's next? Because we don't see revenue at the level that we'd love it to be, right? And that's probably the case for most things. But as these systems continue to mature and we continue to listen to customers on how we meet them where they're at, motivates an example of one of those tools. We consider ourselves a widget that sits on top of these systems, but we'll find other things that allow them to streamline their process to make it easier to buy online because we know they want to. We've heard this for 10 years. Give us a way to buy from you direct. We're very excited about that. We want to buy more online. But there's just this hesitancy. And what we found with all our research is this is one of probably many that we and other tech vendors will come up with to make it easier for them. Meet them where
And
they're
do
at
you
is what we
see,
call.
at least for me, I would imagine or I would assume that this is a great opportunity for you to potentially white label your technology to some of the major e-commerce platform vendors out there as well to bring this capability into their platforms. Like you say, maybe they've built an amazing e-commerce engine that does lots of things really well. It does multi-location inventory. It does all these amazing things. But it doesn't necessarily, they don't want to have to necessarily go out and build all this tooling to bring this omni-channel order importation, matching, all that sort of stuff, messaging. They don't necessarily want to have to build that all out as well as the core commerce capability. Is this a scenario where you see a future where you eventually start white labeling this to multiple platform vendors as well so that they can just default integrate it in and it just becomes part and parcel of their platform?
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. And whether it's the platform vendors, consultants, it's already white labeled. We're ready to go with it. And it's part of the reason that we put a lot of time, energy, and money into the patent applications. Because as you can appreciate, like this is hard, but this is also isn't rocket science, right? Like it's here, it's there. We wanted to put a moat around this. We would love to work with any of the e-commerce platforms and applications because it's a quick boom widget that brings so much value. Right now, we're just working with the B2B suppliers and we just say, hey, what do you think? It takes us 30 minutes to install and integrate, and we're up in a day. And then all of a sudden, people are just rolling and uploading in there. But for us, it's only as good as the communication that comes from the supplier because if buyers don't know it's there, then there's no value, right? So
And
they're
it goes
putting
back
it
to my adoption discussion.
in
It's that before you implement the technology, go and have the
a plan.
conversation with the customer. Have the conversation with your internal team. Because if the
Yep.
internal team doesn't have buy-in, they're not going to onboard their customers into the tool or the
Right.
technology. They're not going to help them place their first 1, 2, 3 orders using the technology. Therefore, it's not going to see high uptake. Therefore, you're not going to see any value in the business out of it. So at the end
Spot
of the
on.
day, if you're not doing adoption planning before you implement technology, you're probably not going to see the value that you think you're going to see.
That's it. Absolutely. And everyone wants people to buy online. That's the lowest cost of customer acquisition, like period. So
Yeah.
the more we can send people there, those tiny margins that suppliers have been running forever, those will start to grow. It'll get really exciting. You'll see more volume. But yeah, we've got customers that have redone their trade show booth to make sure that they brand it whatever they want. It's their products. It's as if they built
Yeah.
it. And we love doing that, right? We don't have to take credit for any of it. As long as people are using it and growing and all that. So it's at the footer of all, they require their CSRs and sales reps to have it at the footer of their signature, their emails. It's got to be front and center on the website so that people start to pick it up. And it's a trend. And this is another great channel to buy from us.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit like, was it McDonald's or maybe it was Burger King or whatever it was, order your way or get it your way or whatever it was. It's like that same kind of thing. It's that same mentality. It's do it your way. Mm-hmm. We'll adapt to you as opposed to expecting you to adapt to us. Now, what we often find when we're doing consulting is that, sure, when we first implement or we help a brand implement their e-commerce implementation for the first time, or maybe it's getting them up and running on EDI or Punch-Out or whatever it is, because we don't do implementation, we're pure consultancy. So we'll help them identify the right partners to actually do the implementation. But what we find is that even if their customers are saying, look, we'll use all of these digital services, but we'll continue to actually place the order the way we always have. What we find is that oftentimes if they're accessing a buyer's portal to do all these other things, to check inventory, to check the status of a shipment, to place a quote request, to do all these different things, what we find is that just by just a natural adoption, they go, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm living in this portal every single day. Mm-hmm. Why don't I also just complete the transaction here? Why don't I just add the products to my cart and click the checkout button right here, right now? Because all this other stuff is super easy for me to do through this portal. Let's just try out and see if ordering this way is just as easy. And so we find that there's a natural migration, even for the customer cohort that says, no, I'll keep ordering through Bob or Jane, my sales reps, because I love them and they're great and they treat me really well, that there's this natural slow migration to digital ordering channels because of how fast, easy, and clean they are. And then they can see their order history, they can interact with it. It makes their life better and easier. And so it just feels very natural. It's what I would call an evolution rather than a revolution. Yeah. And are you seeing a similar sort of pattern with customers that use your technology?
Absolutely. And I love that you bring this up. Like, your knowledge of the customer is huge for your customers. They're lucky to have you. We see all the time, these suppliers have stood up these e-commerce platforms and people are using them. They're checking availability, they're checking prices, they're doing all these things, right?
Checking MOQs, all that stuff.
Absolutely, all of it. And then they're bowing out. And the reason that I hear in our research that has shown that I'm checking availability of a few items that I'm curious about because I don't know, or the pricing, the things that I'm concerned about. But I still have this list of 50 items I need to order. I'm not going to take the time to enter all 50. I'm going to check these. And that's part of the reason that we found that people aren't going into the end, because you're still looking at 30 items that are listed here. Those are the items I always order. I know they're there. Now, let's just say that I'm looking to purchase now. I take that whole file, I upload it. I do my checks on those 10 items that I was looking at for availability, price, whatever. But now I'm ready to transact because I know the rest of them are there. So even if they're just purely checking pricing, they still have to manually enter the stuff in and search it, and it just takes time. But we're seeing some customers, early adopters especially, that used to do that are now flowing through and getting it done.
And what is the wow factor for not only your merchant clients, the sellers, but what is the wow factor for the buyers? Because to me, if I was an old school, I've been doing this, I've been on the buy side for 30 years, right? And all of a sudden now I can populate the cart any way I want. I can text it in, I can WhatsApp it in, I can Slack it in, whatever, I can email it in, whatever. Are they just blown away by how seamless and easy executing the transaction is by this auto population of the cart experience and auto matching of this limited product information I'm giving, but yet it's making sure I'm ordering the right thing and asking me questions if it's not clear which thing I want? Like, there must be a wow factor there that just lights people up, I would imagine.
The handwritten note or that monster Excel sheet. The handwritten note is mostly it, because people almost pride themselves in having unreadable handwriting.
Yes, almost
So
like a doctor's signature kind of situation.
exactly. And when they see that we read their unstructured, unreadable with the human eye, oftentimes, I've got some crazy examples. And then we said, okay, we can read this, but we also know what you bought before, right? Because we're reaching into the previous order history.
Transactional system. Yep.
Yes. And then we're looking at everything around it. And then what we recommend is exactly what they want 99.9% of the time. But they're still stuck on the how the heck did you read that? And
Yes.
it gets fun. It's almost a game in some cases. I've seen some customers that have intentionally playing with it, right? Let me try this one. You're not going to get this. So I think it's how smart this stuff is and continually gets better every day. Not only character recognition in unstructured files, but then the matching of it. And there'll be customers that there's an obvious choice for some things, and based on a description alone, description is the part that is really interesting. You can write numbers, but when you write a short description and it matches, there's an obvious choice for 80% of customers. There's 20% that pick the more expensive product for whatever reason, or something that's a little different because of the configuration of their system, and that they recognize that part, but also give them the option to pick from additional things. That's the aha moment for the buyers that I've seen so far. The back of a roof shingle. It's really in the field. I didn't have paper on me, right? And I took a picture of it and sent it. That's the part that's crazy. And these contractors are ridiculously busy right now. They don't have time
Yeah.
to wait on the phone for anyone. Or maybe Johnny's at lunch. Well, what am I going to do? I need it now. And I'm not going to go down and stand in line or wait at the counter to get my stuff. I need to know
At
that
Home Depot or whatever it is to try to get
exactly.
my crap.
These building supply companies, they're busy too, and they're having trouble keeping people. So let's give these people, the contractors, the ability to do what they need to do and know that it's there. But it's also the communication with returns, like you were talking about. It's the whole life cycle. They need to be able to know where things are at any given time because they're busy. They can't be we always say no surprises. If a customer shows up and their product's not where it needs to be, they might go somewhere else, right? They don't want to wait in line at a desk. They don't like time is money for them. If Johnny's at lunch as a CSR, the guy they call every time and isn't available and no one else is either, that's a job that they're wasting an hour trying to deal with. So they need immediate, because the parts pickers, they're always on. Just get me the part.
Yeah.
I don't need to communicate with somebody to communicate with the part picker in order to get it. Let me just communicate right with the part picker versus with their monitor and what they need to pick. So that's the part that we really try to focus on.
And there seems to be at least some level of overlap between, what you guys do or what you are hoping to continue to do and CPQ systems, right?
Oh yeah.
So configure, price, quote, as being from the B2B world, there's a
Yep.
lot of configurable products, right? Where you have to select this facet, and that ultimately determines the price of the variant that you're selecting, the inlet diameter, the outlet diameter, the flow rate, all these different things, right? Especially in the industrial space. There's a lot of CPQ requirements often in this space. And as I understand it, at least, you don't necessarily pitch yourself as a CPQ system, but I'm guessing that in some respects, sometimes you either have to integrate in with CPQ systems or pull data from CPQ systems, or maybe on your roadmap, adding CPQ functionality to your platform is on your radar. But what does CPQ mean to you in your world?
It's funny you ask. CPQ in my world means a lot. I've spent about half my career building CPQ products. I was a part of I worked with the original big machines, the Chris Schutz and Godard Abel back in the late 90s, 2000s that sold to Oracle. My two previous companies ago, Lead Method sold to Revelize, owned by TA Associates, and they're a roll up of, I don't know, there are 20 CPQ companies at this point. So I've always thought about sprinkling CPQ into about everything I've built. We're working on some stuff that I can't talk about now, but as a part of this, because you're right, the engineered product is a big category. It's not just about buying your 4 square box for the electrical project. I need a customization for this, especially in the fluid handling space. And I've been there
Yes.
for a good part of my career, those pumps and those valves and controls and things like that. So I love CPQ. There is absolutely a space for it in this process, in e-commerce, in automating processes for internal sales. So I'm really glad you brought it up. I love to nerd out about CPQ. So anytime.
So it's on your radar is what you're
It
saying.
is always. It always is, because it's a wonderful thing. It's a shoot. I remember in 1999, we were going around, these outside reps were carrying around these 1,000-page catalogs. How do we digitize
Yep.
that? And then we figured out how to size and select an industrial pump. And then we said, okay, now what's the configuration? There's 100 different options available for this. How do we bring that to the web? And the web was pretty early then still, right? That was so fun. Anyway, there's a lot of opportunity there for sure.
Love it. Other than CPQ, what is on your radar? What is the high on the priority list that either your customers are asking for and you don't do yet, or you've just seen gaps in the market over the next 6, 12, 18 months? AI is moving at a blistering pace. It's crazy. Multiple large language models doing different things. That's improving every day. Still lots of hallucinations, still lots of challenges, still getting better every day as well. Still a case of garbage in, garbage out. So having good quality catalog data is still important. It always will be. But what is like high on your priority list if you were to look out at least over the next 6 months? What's high on the priority list for you?
I intentionally try to stay pretty focused because there's a lot of founders and folks out there that chase the shiny objects. And my team keeps me honest on that too. But I think that there is so much to do still with speed and matching for unstructured data using large language models, OCRs, all sorts of things. The cross-reference product catalog, right? I came in with this manufacturer's SKU number, but how does it match with this? We're doing a ton of work with that. So we're, at least in my mind, as I wake up every day, I'm focused on automating that internal process for the sales team to save 40 to 40% of their day, getting as many conversations as I can like this with folks in the e-commerce space to light a fire under this patent pending tech that we've got, because buyers are now asking their suppliers to offer it, which is really exciting. I love the CPQ element because not everything's a one size fits all. It's got to be configured. And having that element within the e-commerce environment is a really interesting thing. Is that tomorrow? No. People are going to probably continue to buy configured products that are always more expensive by conversations with the application engineers and the inside sales. But there's a space for it in e-commerce as we go. Our minds are around catalog matching and speed of experience for that buyer. Because if there's a lot of really, really smart things out there, but if they don't work in the time that buyers are on your website, then they don't work. And so that's the part that we're really hammering down on. Sure, there's lots of other ideas out there that I like to see. The sales enablement part, sales insights, making that these B2B companies better at selling, more efficient, smarter, right? Just because you know the products really well doesn't mean you always know what that next best action, upsell, cross-sell. So applying that to the e-commerce environment we're working on now, sure, that's been around for Amazon since 2000, but it's very different when you apply it to a B2B supplier that's not on the Amazon platform. They've got 50,000 engineers working on it. Somebody uploads an unstructured file for this product. Guess what? We don't have it in stock. Is that a dead end? It shouldn't be. Is there other options, smart options, not just anything, but is there something that we can recommend in that experience to still keep them? That guided selling within the e-commerce
substitute product, an alternative product, an upgraded product, whatever it might be.
All of it. Yep. We've got to give them a solution. And if we don't, then it's not always an e-commerce or inside sales. It's got to be a combination of both.
Totally. Maybe we hand that off to an inside sales rep to say, let's have a conversation.
Yep. And that's where those sales insights come in. So give my salesperson all the information you need. Here are the pages that they visited on the e-commerce environment. Here are the pages, here are the products they bought. Here's the one that they didn't. And here's 3 other products that you need to call them right now and talk to them about. Right. It's a combination of the two.
Or here's what they removed, or here's what they removed from their cart because it was out of stock, or here's what they have put on back order because it was out of stock, or whatever it might be. And here's effectively a hot lead or a hot opportunity for you to chase up with that customer.
Love it. That's it. Exactly.
Wow.
It's fun for sure. That's why you're in it.
B2B is cool, man. A lot of people think B2B commerce is not sexy, but I tell you, once you dig deep into it, it's interesting because the first half, 3/4 of my career was spent in the B2C and D2C world. But as I was building, I had my own e-commerce pure play, and then I was helping run and build agencies and do other things. And always the most interesting projects that I worked in through the entirety of my career were the really complex B2B
Mm-hmm.
projects, or it was a D2C brand that was looking to establish a B2B channel. And it was always the B2B projects that were the most interesting because they had the most complex back office systems. They had the most complex catalogs. They had the most complex sales processes. Everything was the most complex that it could be. And therefore, there was nothing vanilla. There was nothing bog standard. There was nothing out of the box that would work for most of these sellers in the way that they needed to sell their products and get them to market. And as someone who I lean more towards the operational and technical side of e-commerce. And so for somebody like me, who's a senior solution architect, the more challenging it is, the more fun it is for someone like me to try to find a solution that can work for them. And so there's in the B2C and D2C world, there's a lot more standardization. There's a lot more out of the box tooling for them. And at different phases of growth, as say a D2C brand, you might start out on Shopify with Klaviyo and with Xero or QuickBooks in the back end. And you'll start out with a certain set of integrations and these 10 apps. And then when you get a little bit bigger, you'll graduate to this set of technology, and then you'll eventually graduate to this. And it's a very well-trodden path, right? The design patterns are very consistent. The technologies used are very consistent. And in the B2C and D2C world, there's a lot of FOMO. So somebody will always say, what does Nike use? Or what do these brands use? I want to use that technology, right? Whereas in the B2B world, everybody thinks they're special, right? And in many cases, they are special. But the reality is that there hasn't been that level of standardization in the B2B world yet. And therefore, there is a natural level of complexity that you just don't see anywhere else. And that's what keeps it interesting. And that's what keeps me engaged with it, because I am learning something new literally every single day. And that, how can you not stay engaged with your industry when you're constantly learning, right? No matter how long you've been in it, you're still learning every day.
Love it. Fantastic. You're inspiring, sir.
Oh, well, thank you. So are you. Look, I love what you're doing. How do you guys make your money? How do you charge for your solution? Is it a modular fixed like monthly fee? I mean, you're a SaaS platform. So is it based on the number of API calls made? Is it based on the amount of revenue that goes through your platform that you drive? Like, how do you charge for your platform?
Yeah, we try to keep things very simple. The days of counting number of seats and all these different things. When we buy software, there's some of these bigger companies, there's individuals, full-time job that are responsible for counting the seats. We really based on the size of the organization. So the larger companies are going to get more value from it, more revenue, pay more than the small ones.
Yep.
We have a solution for the $1 billion companies and then the $10 million companies, right? We have 3 modules. So there's the sort of order code automation piece that integrates with the ERP. We have the sales insights. So now we coach the salespeople on how to be better at their jobs and how to sell more. Then we have our e-commerce module. Most companies opt for all 3 of them. Surprisingly, there's some small distributors that still don't have e-commerce, right? So
something like 40% of B2Bs in the US don't do e-commerce at all in any meaningful way, which is nuts.
Yep. We have a few of those and they're hell bent on getting it. So then great, we'll have a solution when you're ready, but they want to automate their internal process to start. And so it's a monthly subscription SaaS product. There's a setup fee, and just based on the size of the organization, we really do our best to work with everyone that's interested in growing their company, and whether it's starting small and growing as we grow together, that's the fit. But I've worked with a lot of B2B suppliers over my years, love the industry, love the people. They're often 10 years behind your typical SaaS company, but they're smart about it. They're measured, they're tactical. They build their spreadsheets and model all the different vendors, and then they make their decisions. And the great thing about it is you usually have partners for life. It's not a typical SaaS world where they buy the next shiny object and churn after 6 months. It's a relationship, and that's the way we like to see it.
That's the way how the whole B2B commerce space has evolved over the years. It's all been based on those personal relationships, and that's what makes B2B salespeople so amazing in the first place. And awesome. I'm all about it, augmenting and I'm all about giving salespeople superpowers, not replacing them. And I'm sure you're exactly the same, and making them better at what they do and freeing them up from admin that's crappy. Because translating a handwritten note that's attached to an email is a crappy part of a sales rep's job. And if we can automate the crappiness out of their life, then it's going to make them enjoy their work a lot more and be a lot more productive at it and sell a whole lot more stuff as a result. So I'm 100% on your page. I'm 100% in agreement with you.
It's interesting. That wasn't a part of their job description, right? 10 keying orders in. It was about product knowledge. It was about relationships with customers. That's what we want to empower them to do, to ultimately sell more, to make everyone more money, and less about the busy work. Love it.
Couldn't agree more. Now, I will drop your LinkedIn link into the show notes, as well as your website into the show notes. But other than that, other than the Motivate website and your LinkedIn link, how do you like people to get a hold of you if they want to have a deeper conversation about how your sales order automation can dramatically impact their business?
Appreciate that, Jason. Yeah, you can email me direct at jj@gomotivate.com. Also, text me at 360-790-3783. Happy to talk to everyone that comes through. We've obviously got a large team for implementations and sales, but I'm the CEO. I love to talk to folks as much as I can learn about the industry, folks like you, Jason, and everyone else. It's an absolute pleasure.
Amazing, amazing. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, an hour has absolutely flown by. Super appreciate your time. It was a super interesting conversation for me. I absolutely loved it. But this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Justin Johnson from Motivate, what is your question for me today?
I would love to hear the story of how and why you live in Mexico, the wonderful place of Mexico, wonderful country, Mexico.
Fantastic question. Do love living here. Just bought a house here in Puebla. Been living in Mexico
Congratulations.
for a year and a half now. Spent all of 2023 traveling extensively around Mexico with my wife and my dog. We were traveling to explore the country, but we're also traveling to find out where we felt like we could put down some roots, maybe a place we could call home. And we did over 20,000 kilometers driving around Mexico last year.
Wow.
And there was a lot of motivations for moving to Mexico from New Zealand. The final straw, I think, was how New Zealand handled COVID. You may or may not know, New Zealand was one of the most locked down countries in the entire world for COVID. 3 years, borders closed, nightmare, especially for those of us that chose not to vaccinate. It was a total hell on earth scenario. Australia was also very locked down, one of the most locked down countries in the world. So the whole region, the whole Australia-New Zealand region was just incredibly a very difficult place to live during COVID, where we couldn't be more than 15 kilometers from our house. And
Wow.
it was crazy. It was insane. The amount of restrictions that we had put on us over that time was pretty nuts. And for people that are pretty hardcore travelers, my wife and I love to travel. We love to experience new places, new foods, new cultures. It was really difficult for us. And so we were looking for an escape, for one. But also, I had clients in North America. I had clients in Europe. The United States, for all of its ills, whatever, is still the hotbed of e-commerce and digital innovation. UK also, but definitely in terms of North America, the US is where it's at in terms of e-commerce growth and opportunity. I was already wanted to be a lot more involved in the conference circuit and in the event circuit in the United States around commerce. The United States is still the best there is in that regard as well. So for me, it was the food, the culture. I had been to Mexico a number of times when I lived in California, because that's where I was raised in Southern California. So of course I was close to Mexico there in Southern California. And so for us, there was a lot of attractions. It significantly reduced cost of living. The place we bought here, this house, brand new, brick and tile place we bought here in Puebla, it's about 1/6 of what it would have cost us in New Zealand for an equivalent
Wow.
place. The food, the culture, the people, the weather, the sights, the opportunity to travel here is incredible. Cheap and easy access to the United States by direct flight from Puebla or Mexico City into the United States. Super easy access. Just lots and lots of, for us, there were many motivations, but I think the straw that broke the camel's back was just the horrific lockdowns we experienced in
Yeah,
New Zealand during
I
COVID.
understand. Well, I got to come visit you in Mexico. It sounds like a wonderful city and your experience. I appreciate that you love to travel and new foods and new cultures and all that. That's what life's about.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.